Hello, everyone. I wanted to record this as a voice message because I believe it will preserve its meaning. So you can hear directly from me here my intentions. I wanted to extend a moment of gratitude towards those who have reached out with their concerns in regards to the first Hidden Files episode I shared. I just wanted to put together that little side series of mine so I can further explore certain topics on my own accord. Take things into a slightly more serious matter. And many of you were concerned about some of the things I shared in that first episode. Like I said, I do truly appreciate the concern. The situation with my father, I know it's run its course. He's likely never going to get out of prison. And there have been some of you who said that I need to work on being able to forgive. Truth be told, I forgave him. I wrote him a letter in July of 2020. I didn't put a return address because, well, someone like him isn't exactly someone you want to keep around, you know? In this letter, I acknowledge that while yes, I was upset about the ordeal, and rightfully so, I understood that the reason why he became the way he did was because things happened to him. He made the choice to indulge in that lifestyle, and now has paid the price. I also shared with him that he has grandchildren from a daughter he tried to keep secret, who I managed to successfully track down shortly after he went to prison. To which I didn't really have to do much. She was apparently sitting right next to me in my math class. I should also point out that while it does not necessarily excuse my mentality, it would probably make more sense to some of you who don't quite realize that I'm actually much younger than I look. I'm only 27 years old. This weekend just so happens to be an anniversary for me. When I first started going public about anything I've had involvement with in the supernatural. It was during this time that I had learned about my father's actions and wanted to start pursuing something to not only give myself a healthy distraction from everything that was going on, but in truth, part of it was to not only prove to myself that I was not the same monster, but in the event that I gain traction, gain some sort of notoriety with what I do, it would give an opportunity for my younger brothers and sisters, ones who were much too young to really understand everything that was happening, to reach out to me, should they ever choose to. Now, mind you, I'm the oldest out of my siblings, and the youngest, God, makes me feel old, is just barely a teenager. So, Should that day come, I know it's going to be hard, but throughout this journey in life, I've tried to offer up some of the same wisdom that I learned, that I wish that I had some sort of mentor to impart this onto me when everything was taking place. The same year I started going public with my supernatural endeavors was also the same year that I lost my grandfather. He had been fighting cancer for about 5 years, and the following December, it finally got the best of him. He was one of my first supporters. He even offered up the highway department he was the foreman for, that he believed was haunted, so I could bust out all the equipment I've saved up to earn and start gaining some field experience. Being that I was still in high school, a lot of groups were kind of hesitant about having me come along, even though by the time I was 14 years old, I was already 6'5" and shaving my head because my hairline had receded. Nobody really could tell. That's a story for another time. Having gotten to meet and speak with many of you, it brought a lot of things to perspective that I've come a lot farther than I've realized, and I still have a long ways to go. And that journey excites me. Gets to be overwhelming at times, but in a good way. If you don't feel nervous, if you don't feel a little bit overwhelmed about the opportunities that come forward, you don't really have a chance to grow, do you? I also shared my rebuttal about some of the skeptics because it greatly bothered me that some random stranger goes to discuss how they've dealt with issues involving mental health, and immediately they started to try to pick it apart, as if somehow by the fact that I was a man, there was no way I could actually have experienced the things I experienced. Now granted, I also fully acknowledge that there's several things that I bring forward that would be very difficult for me to validate without having some way of recording images I see in my mind and being able to broadcast them to a computer. It's not necessarily in the realm of impossibility. That's something that's been in development for several years. So I can only imagine what that will bring forward. But in the same light, I also have to acknowledge that too much has happened to really invalidate what I've said, what I've experienced. And I'll admit there's been times where I wanted to walk away, where it seemed completely overwhelming. But something always drew me back in, and I've come to accept that from everything from genetics alone to the things I experienced in life, that was meant to get me ready. Many of you have been wondering what my soul mission was. Some of you may recall I have a grandmother who was said to speak to angels. I was also told by individuals who I should have been probably a bit more skeptical about because of their negative intentions that she was diagnosed schizophrenic. However, upon meeting her for the first time, because due to several rather nasty situations on both sides of my family, there's a lot about my family tree I don't know, probably for good reason. When I first got to speak to my grandmother, my father's mother, I should elaborate, she had too much knowledge of certain events that I kept close to my chest in order to test anybody who would try to claim they had psychic ability, tried to claim that they had some sort of reading on me. And after my interview with Elena, truth be told, I'm find myself reconsidering a lot of what I brushed aside. Is that a bad thing? Not really. But it does paint a much more vibrant picture. My grandmother, she told me that part of my soul contract, if you will, was to be a protector. To be able to help people take a stand against dark forces. And of course, in order to fulfill this, conflict had to occur to motivate me. Everything involving my father, every little bit of that, it had to prepare me, to put me in the mentality to where I would understand what people went through and feel that drive to make sure others didn't have to go through certain things. But if they did, I could help them. You don't exactly hear about superheroes having a pleasant upbringing, now do you? The other part, which I remember, was to understand how it could be so easy for people to fall into these dark influences. I've come to realize that it's the absence of perseverance in the face of fear. The lack of willingness, the lack of willpower to do the right thing even though the outcome scares the living shit out of you. It's allowing yourself to become so engulfed in the darkness that fear brings. To sink so low that you lose the light, the ability to see the light of hope. It's not that it's without reach, it's just that there comes a point where one realizes they're in a dangerous situation and they just give up. Perhaps preemptively. Perhaps they could have been easily in a situation where they just made the right call. They could have been saved, but the overwhelming fear made it to where the parts of their minds that would point that out to them were essentially switched off. As much as I hate the fact that things happen, I also have to acknowledge they had to happen for a reason. And I will always try to do my best foot forward, try to give my best foot forward to reach out to as many as I can. Whether it be through books, movies, podcast interviews, whatever the form may be, there's a reason why I've set up everything to reach as far and wide as possible. Regardless of how certain platforms may inhibit progress. Like I said, a little project I've started putting together that essentially puts my personal journals into the public eye. One of these sections was for some reason blocked without reason. Now, this particular section, I should also disclose, involves a brief encounter I had with Men in Black. Nothing too serious, no threats, it's just that at the time I was starting to research them, then all of a sudden, one day, they showed up. There wasn't really any threats, there wasn't really any deep projects I was working on, it's just that the vibe of the incident made it to where their message was, alright, you wanted to see us, now what? Basically, they probably figured that me being a young kid at the time, I was like 16 when this happened. They probably figured just showing up was enough to scare me off. If anything, it tickled my curiosity even more. Now that I had some sort of validation that it was true. And just like the situation with my wife and children, I naturally was skeptical. I feared that I was losing my mind, and like I said, where the possibility of schizophrenia being in my bloodline and it being a genetic condition, I feared that some of the very things that gave me motivation to always keep fighting, to always try to improve myself, to be the husband and father that my wife and children deserved, or at least as close to it as I could get. The motivation to become better was all a fabrication of a very sick mind. And there's a lot of people that are going to start coming forward very soon who have that same fear. And while some may interpret the fact that I am openly speaking about this as me not letting it go, some who have felt that I was targeting them because they know that it was their actions that put me into certain mentality. Well, my reactions to certain things that they did that brought me to certain low points. I will always speak open and honestly about it. Because sometimes all it takes to save a life is a smile. Other times, people need just a bit of a smack upside the head to realize that they're not the only one to have ever experienced something, you know? To have that validation that the fear that they're being isolated is complete bullshit. And that there are others who get it, who understand, or will at least try to understand, and are willing to step up to help you become the best version of yourself as possible. Because by helping you, in many ways, they can also help themselves. And isn't that what it should be all about in the end? Helping out one another? So, I will take this moment to announce that there will be some new projects coming forward very soon, and that if any of you are interested, you'll be able to join in. And I hope you will, because the more people we rally to these causes, the much more power we have as a whole, working together. And it doesn't matter if you necessarily believe in anything of the supernatural, as long as you're just willing to help without hesitation or agitation. And let's face it, we're probably going to run into quite a few people that are just so set in their ways of self-destruction that they can't be helped. I know a few family members I can ramble off right now who followed those patterns. And while it is their life, their choices, the issue I take is that I know damn well people are getting hurt because of those choices. And I had to get involved because, well, let's face it, if you don't at least try to step in when someone reaches out saying that they're fearing they're going to end their own life, wouldn't that make you just as guilty for ignoring them? It doesn't matter if one perceives that the ET phenomenon or the coming arrival is true or not. The underlying messages of goodness, kindness, love, love to self, love to others, and love to home, to our world, to heal instead of injure, and to help instead of leaving lost. Those are the lessons that matter. And no matter whatever the future may hold for us, I have a pretty good idea of what that may be. As long as we hold true to those values, we can overcome just about anything.